Hello everyone, this is Kenneth Bruni from Tech, and welcome back to the channel. So in this series of videos, we are learning Python, and to be more specific, this is SENG 207 Python for Engineers, and this is a course taught at the second year at the University of Ghana at the School of Engineering Sciences. So based on the structure we have over here, in this particular video, we are going to look at conditional statements. And if you have been following along, you could see that we have this listed out in this particular structure. It is almost like the structure we have like chapters of a book, and everything we are learning is going to be an aggregated knowledge from the previous knowledge we have in other chapters. So today we are going to look at conditional statements, and these conditional statements, what I have online, one says Python conditional statements, and we have the if, the elif, and the else. So over here, it is very interesting, and now let's see an example. Now remember what we used to do if we have, for instance, print, and in here I'm going to have Kenneth, and if I'm to print another one, for instance, Bruni, and I would want to print, I would want to print what I have over here as University of Ghana. Now these are variables we use over and over and over again. Now if I run this, we do get exactly everything we have over here. Now remember what I said from the beginning, that as far as the order of execution goes, the first piece of logic will execute before the second piece, before the third piece, and any other one that comes after it. So over here, what you have on line 2, which we are trying to print Kenneth, was executed. Then it came to print Bruni, was also executed. Then finally we had print University of Ghana in this particular order being executed. Now this is where we use conditional statements to kind of alter the flow. And when I say alter the flow, we can actually make Bruni print out based on a certain condition even before Kenneth gets printed. And this is what we are going to look at. Now the first example we are going to look at is this. Let me give you a scenario. So here in Ghana, you need to attain the age of 18 before you vote. So you are going to write a program that the user will be asked to enter the age, and based on that entry, their logic will be evaluated, and we are going to check if the user is equal to or above 18. Then we are just going to print out you are qualified to vote, and if the user is not up to 18, then we are going to print out you are not qualified to vote. So clearly you can see that we are going to apply conditional statements over here, as well as the comparison operators we covered in the previous video. So over here, let's have a variable called, and I'll say let's call this voting age. So voting underscore age, and this is 18 here in Ghana. And now let's have a variable called age. So this age, and over here let's use the input function. We've already spoken about this. We already know what this input function does. It gives us the functionality where would have the user inputting values over here. So over here I'll say enter your age, and I'll leave a space over here. So as at this point, I can actually print out the age variable, and now when I run this, we do get enter your age over here. So when I type in 20, it says 20. But remember what we used to do if we were also to try and check out the data type of age. And if you are following this video as we have it, you know what the data type is. So now when I run this and say 18 once again, see that we have 18 printed out over here, and this is of a class str, which is a string. Now because we are comparing values, we need to do a typecast, and that's why I said we are aggregating on the previous knowledge that we have. So in order to do a typecast, we can simply do an int, wrap everything we have over here into an int. So whichever value we type, which by default this input function is going to accept it as a string, will now be converted into an int over here. So now let me save this, and if I run this once again, if I'm to type 18 and press enter, we do get an int over here. So now we know that there's an int and it's looking good. So now let's make progress, and this is where we use the conditional statement. So I can say that if the age that we have typed over here, okay, if it is greater or equal to the voting age, we have that static data over there, then we bring a colon over here. So after bringing this colon, we press enter, and this will get indented for us. Now the only thing you need to worry about Python when you are programming is your indentation. So for instance, let me say print out you are qualified to vote over here. I think I have the spelling of qualified wrong, so you are qualified to vote. So I'll save this, and now when I run this, let's try this. So first of all, let's try 20, and once I press enter, it tells me you are qualified to vote. So this is looking good. So all that we are trying to say is, if this condition is met, okay, if you do this comparison operator we covered in the previous video, if you do this comparison, that whichever number we typed in here is greater or equal to 18, which is the voting age, then you are qualified to vote. Now let's run this program and see. So when I type in 15 over here and press enter, we only get nothing being run over here. Now actually the value we have over here is less than the voting age, the condition we have over here, so definitely nothing gets printed out. But now let's try and see if there's an alternative way of actually handling this. Now I'll get out of that indentation, and I'll say something like else if. So in order to do else if, that's a elif. So I can say elif age, and for instance, if I'm to do less than the voting age, which I have over here as 18. Now I'd want to print something like you are not qualified to vote, this way. So if the age you have in there is less than 18, then you are not qualified to vote. So now let me save this and run this. Now if I'm to type in 15, you are not qualified to vote, because that's the logic you are trying to implement over here. Let me run it again. If I'm to type 18 and press enter, it tells me you are qualified to vote, because over here we are saying that if it is greater or equal to. All right, now let's try and see something over here, because this is very interesting. If I'm to do, for instance, KEN, which in this case it is not a proper data type we are trying to put it over here. When I press enter, so we get a value error, and it says invalid literal for int with base 10, and as you see over here, so it was trying to do a typecast of what you have over here, Ken, and it wasn't working out. So now what we can also do is, instead of typecasting on line 3, we can actually do a typecast over here, and that's going to help us do what you want to do. But basically this is what I want to implement. Now there's a numeric method, and let me just comment this out, and let me just do this over here. So let's say this is a string, so voting age is a string over here. Now I can do something like voting age dot, and I'll use the numeric method over here, and it says this returns a boolean, so true if the string is numeric, false otherwise. A string is numeric if all characters in the string are numeric and there is at least one character in the string. So that's basically this numeric method, and I think this will solve our problem, because everything has to be numeric in order for this to work, because when we type in Ken over there or any strange value, we are violating or breaking our code. So this numeric is going to help us. So now let me just get back to what I have over here, and we need to accept this. So let me just come back and show you this. Now this is numeric, is not going to work on this. All right, so if I'm to print out, first of all, let me just come back here. This is a string, and now if I'm to print out what I have in here, we are definitely going to see true over here. Now if I type in KEN as we were trying to type in there, we are going to see a false. So over here everything is looking good. Now we want an instance where whatever thing we type into the input function will be accepted as a string, and we are going to use the is numeric to check. So when I run this, this is going to be a true. Now in order for this to work, if I'm to leave this as an integer as I have it this way and run this, we are getting a problem over here. It says int object has no attribute is numeric. It is only the string that has the attribute is numeric. Later on, when we deal with object-oriented programming, we are going to write our own methods, and a lot of these things are going to make sense. Like I said, we'll do a revisit of some of the topics we have covered and rather fill in the gaps. So this is numeric only applies to string and not to int, and that's what the name method actually means. So when we do a typecast, the reason why I need to bring all this is if we do a typecast at this level, this will now be saved as an int over here, and we cannot use the is numeric to check if it is numeric, and that's where a problem may come from. So all that I want to do, let me uncomment this. All that I want to do is I would rather leave this as a string, and now I can say that if the age dot is, and I can now do is numeric over here, and I'm going to bring a colon over here. Now if I'm to print this out, this is going to tell me that whichever thing I type, if it is 18, then it is going to be true. So if this evaluation is done on the variable age, then I would want to indent everything I have over here. So now this block of code is now going to execute if and only if it is true, and that's what we see over here. Now I could have done if is numeric is equal to true like this, or if it is equal to true. So here we have a double equal to, because just a one equal to will be like we assigning this true to whichever thing we have over here. So we need to use a double equal to. So I'm saying that if h dot is numeric, whatever thing we type inside of this which is stored in the variable h is numeric, if it is equal to true, then we'd want to implement this code, and now this is going to look good. So now let's save this, and if I'm to run this, we are going to catch an error, but then gradually everything will make sense. So let's say we have 20, and when I press enter, we do get a type error over here. It says that greater than or equal to sign not supported between instances of string and int, and this is actually coming from, it says line 6. So you can see that on line 6 there's an error. It says the conditional statement where we have this line 6 in module, there's a problem over here. So on line 6, all that we are doing is, what we have over here is still a string, age is still a string, we haven't done any typecast. So in order to evaluate this, we then need to typecast the age at this point. So I'm saying, or I'm now going to do a typecast over here, and I'll do same for this in order to make our program robust. So now let's run this once again. Now if I type in 20, everything is okay. It says you are qualified to vote. Now let me run this. If I'm to type in 15, it tells me you are not qualified to vote. Now what if I type in Ken? Our program does not break this time around, but then we need to prompt the user that whatever value you have in there is invalid. Rather type an integer or something. So in order to make this work, and that's where we have this if else and else statement over here. So we can use the if else to alternate between options, and we will now use the else to rather terminate everything. So over here, this is the original condition, and this condition I want to do an else over here. So I'll say else, then I would want to print, in this case, something like invalid. input. So I have something like invalid input over here. So now when I run this, if I type 20, it tells me you are qualified to vote, because then this part of the code will execute. So if the age we are typecasting as int is greater or equal to voting age, which is 18, then it should print you are qualified to vote. Now let's run this again and let's type 12. When I press enter, it says you are not qualified to vote. So this part of the logic will now be executing, because it says age is less than voting age, which is 18. Then in this case, this part of the code will get executed. And then finally, let's run this. And if I'm to type in Ken, which is not a valid input, we do get invalid input over here. Now let's make this a little bit intuitive. I'm going to bring a new line over here. So when I do a slash, this is a new line. And now I'm going to say enter integer values such as, so you can say 1, 2, 3 and things of that sort. So I'll save this, and now when I run this and enter Ken, it says enter integer values, and we are using the /n to terminate that line and bring whatever thing we have over here on a new line. So it says enter integer values like 1, 2, 3, and that's basically going to be a program we are using to check for voting age. So clearly you could see that we have actually aggregated a lot of the knowledge we have gained over the previous videos. So you could see that over here we are using the input function. Then when we came here, we were using some strange methods to do an evaluation. Then we did a typecasting over here, and of course we are using conditional statements to check if some condition is met, do this, else do this, or if else do another thing. And gradually we are also trying to do some multi-line printing and stuff like that. Now remember what you see over here, that we're actually checking if this is equal to true. We could have left this. So all that we are trying to do, in fact, we are cutting down on code, and this is very important. Everybody who sees this will understand that if the age, the variable we have over here dot is numeric, if it is numeric, remember this returns a boolean. So if it is true, then this block of code will execute. We don't need to explicitly say is equal to true. It is definitely going to work this way. So once again, if I'm to run this program, and if I'm to type in the values you are using over here, 20, it tells me you are qualified to vote. Everything is looking good. If I type in, for instance, 11, press enter, it says you are not qualified to vote. And now when I do something like Bruni and press enter, it says invalid input, enter integer value such as 1, 2, and that's exactly what we are trying to put over here. Now this is looking good, and I think this is a very good example for our if else statement. So basically, like I said from the beginning, we are changing, or we are altering the flow of the execution of the Python code. And that's simply because if, for instance, with the last example we had over here, where we have typed in Brony, you could see that what we have over here is skipped, and now we have, or we are trying to print out what we have on line 11. Now there are some few exercises I would want you to try on your own. These are very simple, and if you followed along with the example I gave over here, then this is pretty much going to be very simple. So I'm going to help you do the first one, and I think this one as well. So it says we need to write a program that will take two inputs and check which of the input is greater. So this is very cool and this is very interesting. Let me just comment everything we have over here. So I'll highlight everything and do a comment like this. I'll save this, and now let's look at this exercise we have over here. So we want to check two values and see which one is greater. So let's say we have number 1, and number 1, once again, we'll bring in our input because we want the user to put in the number. So I'm going to say enter first number like this. and let's have number 2. So number 2, and I'm going to say, I'm going to bring an input, and I'll have in here enter second number this way. So we have our first number and our second number. Now remember, by default, these two variables, based on the fact that we are using the input method, are going to be strange. So we can typecast over here at this point, and we can also apply same over here. So I'll do an int, and we are good to go. So these values are now going to be int, and now I want to do the comparison. So I'm going to say that if number 1 is greater than number 2, then what do I want to see? I would want to print out, and over here let's use a formatted string to make things look a little bit interesting. So let's bring or prefix the string we have with an f, and we can say that number 1 is greater than, and let's have another placeholder and put in number 2 over here. Now it is either going to be one of each other, so there's not going to be any in between. So if there's no in between, we can now come out of this loop and now say an else. So else, then we can do something like print, and over here I'm going to bring out a formatted string, and I can say number 2 is greater than, and I'll bring another placeholder over here, and I'll say number 1. Now later on we are going to modify this a little bit because something just came to mind. So now let's run this, and we have enter first number. So I have 5. I'll press enter, and it says enter second number. Second number is 7. So when I press enter, it says 7 is greater than 5, and that's cool. Now let's run this once again. The first number, I'm going to say 10. I'll press enter. The second number, I'll say 5, and we have 10 is greater than 5. So this condition is working. Now what if I have over here 10, then I press another one again, 10. Our program is saying that 10 is greater than 10, which is not true. So sometimes you also need to think outside the box in order to make things look, realistic as it can be. So of course there are instances where you can have the two numbers being the same, so we need to make provision for that. So what I would want to do is I can now do elif. So else if I have for instance number 1 is equal to, and remember this is a comparator operator, so it's equal to number 2, then what I would want to print out is something like this. I can put in a formatted string this way. I'll prefix this with an f, then I'll have something like number 1 is equal to, and I'll bring in my placeholder and bring in number 2 over here this way. So now everything is looking good. Now when I run this, first of all, let's try with 2 different numbers. So let's say I have 9 as my first number and 2 as my second number. So I have 9 is greater than 2. This is looking good. Let's run it another time. I have 3 as my first number, and my second number is 7. And here we have 7 is greater than 3. This is also looking good. Now let's say we have, and this is where we have 5, and the second number is 5. And here we are seeing that 5 is equal to 5. So everything over here is making sense. And this is how we implement or we use conditional statements. So if a condition is met, then whichever code we are indenting will execute. Okay, so over here you can see that this is the first piece of logic. If number 1 is greater than number 2, then you print this out. Else if number 2 is equal to, or sorry, else if number 1 is equal to number 2, you print this out. Or else, because there's going to be only 3 possibilities, it is either going to be greater than, equal to, or less than, and that's what you have over here. Now we could have done this in such a way that let's say we have something like this. So we can see that else if number 1 is less than number 2, okay, then all that we can do is we can see that number 1, we can actually change the statement over here and see number 1 is less than number 2, and in which case anything will now be equal to. So it depends on how you want to put it and the grammar that comes alongside it, okay, and I think this will make a little bit, I mean a lot of sense in a way. So now when I run this first number, I have 10 over here. I'll press enter. Second number, I have 5, and it tells me 10 is greater than 5. Now let's run this program again. First number, I have 4. Second number, I have 9, and it tells me 9 is less than 10. I mean, sorry, 4 is less than 9, and that's with the second logic we have over here. And finally, if I run this and have 2, and the second number is 2, it tells me 2 is equal to 2. So the ball is in your court. Just be creative around this, and you are definitely going to get the same result if you actually implement the logic in a very systematic way. So once again, let me just comment this one out, and I would want us to finally look at this, and this is actually going to be a homework where you have the grade check results program. So you are going to write a program that will accept an input, in which case it's going to be your score, and it will display the grade in the terminal. So you have to go to the University of Ghana grading system and you check. So maybe from 80 to 100 is grade A. So if the user enters 80, then grade A will be displayed. Else if the user enters 70, then that should also correspond to a particular grade. You need to check that one out and implement that in code. But now let's check for odd and even numbers. So we want to write a program where the user will input a number, and we will write a logic to implement or to check if the number entered is odd or even. So now the question is, what is an odd number and what is an even number? Pause this video, do a brainstorm, write it on the paper, and let's see if what you have is actually the same way I'm thinking. So basically, let's start with even numbers. Even numbers are numbers that are divisible by 2 and they give no remainder. So a typical example is 2. So starting from 2, 2 is an even number, and we have 4 an even number, we have 6 an even number, we have 8. We can go on and on. Now these are even numbers because if we divide 2 by 2, we get 1 and the remainder is 0. If we divide 4 by 2, we get 2 and the remainder is 0. When we divide 6 by 2, we get 3, the remainder is 0. And if we are to divide 8 by 2, we get 4 and the remainder is 0. And odd is just the opposite, because when we do divide by 2, there's a remainder. So now this is what we are going to do. So I'm going to say we are going to have a variable we are going to call number, and number is going to be, or is going to accept an input. So I'm going to say enter number, and I'll bring in a space over here. Now from what we've already discussed, we need to do a typecast of this in order to accept this as an int, and this is where the logic comes in as far as checking for even numbers. So I can put out a code over here. It says check for even number. So now I'm going to say if the number we have over here, if this mode2 is equal to 0 as I have it over here, if this is equal to 0, then we can print this as, then let's have a formatted string over here. And in this case, I'm going to say inside of this placeholder, I'm going to say number is even. Then we can do an else because it is either going to be even or odd. So else, I can now print out, and I can put this in a formatted string, and I'm going to say number is odd. So this is very simple. So now let's run this program, and let's start with 2. So it tells me 2 is even. Let's run this again, and let's check with 10. 10 is even as well. Now let's run this and check with let's say 9. When I run this, we get 9 is odd, and indeed 9 is odd. Let's run this again and let's check with 3. When I press enter, we do get 3 is odd. So clearly this is a very simple thing. Remember what the modulus does. The modulus returns a remainder. So all that we are trying to say is that if you divide, or if the mode of the number we have inputted over here and 2 is equal to 0, if there is no remainder, or if the remainder is equal to 0, then indeed it is an even number. But then else, if it has a remainder equal to anything apart from 0, then we would want to say that this is an odd number. So the exercise is basically, like I've already explained, to write a program that checks for, it takes a user input and displays a grade. Now use a lot of the things we have in here: formatted string, typecasting, the input function, and make your program very nice and very beautiful. Okay, so this is going to be the end of this video, and I believe you are gradually learning a lot and trying to understand why we had to do some of the things we did in the previous videos. Now if you don't have, or if you haven't watched the previous videos, kindly go back and watch them, because you could tell that as we move along, we tend to build on the foundation we have already laid. So this is going to be the end of this video. Now if you find value in these videos, kindly help me grow my channel by subscribing to my channel. Also, don't forget to hit the notification button so that anytime I release a video, you'll be duly notified. Also, share this video with friends and family who find this content very useful. At Kembro Tech, we say learn programming. You can do it. Bye bye, and catch you in the next video.